Welcome back, everybody, to this week's World of Inspirational Women in History. We are going to talk about three fantastic women today, and we'll just get cracking on it. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Miss Bree. I'm an educator, farmer, illustrator, singer, and a proud grammar nerd. So welcome to the farm school. First up is Ada Lovelace. Now, she's one that I personally am really inspired by. So Ada Lovelace is someone that's kind of overlooked a lot, but she's really, really an awesome lady. She was born in 1815 in England, and she was the daughter of Lord Byron, who was one of the most famous romantic poets. Brilliant, dramatic, and very unpredictable. Unfortunately, he left the family when Ada was just a baby. Fearing that Ada might inherit her father's dangerous imagination, though, her mother made an unusual decision. She trained her daughter intensely in mathematics and law. At a time when girls were rarely encouraged to pursue advanced study, Ada received private tutoring in algebra, geometry, and science. But something fascinating happened. Instead of losing imagination, Ada combined it with mathematics. She began to see numbers not as cold symbols, but as patterns, possibilities, even poetry. She once described her approach as poetical science, and that blend of imagination and logic would make her extraordinary. In her 20s, Ada met inventor Charles Babbage. He was designing a revolutionary machine called the analytical engine, a mechanical device that could perform calculations using punched cards. Most people saw it just as a fancy calculator. Ada saw something far more powerful. In 1843, she translated an Italian article about Babbage's machine. But she didn't stop there. She added her own detailed notes, which ended up being 3 times longer than the original article. In those notes, she described how the machine could calculate Bernoulli numbers step by step. Historians now recognize this as the first published computer algorithm. In other words, Ada Lovelace wrote the first computer program, more than a century before modern computers existed. But her most astonishing insight was this. She predicted that machines could manipulate symbols, not just numbers. She imagined that one day machines might compose music, create art, and process language. She was imagining computers long before they were physically possible. Ada Lovelace died young, at just 36 years old. For many decades, her work was overlooked. But in the 20th century, as computers emerged, scholars rediscovered her notes and realized how visionary she had been. The programming language, Ada, was named in her honor. Ada Lovelace Day is now celebrated worldwide to recognize women in STEM. Her legacy is not only technical, it's philosophical. She understood that technology is not just about machinery, it's about imagination. She saw that machines could extend human creativity, not replace it. At a time when society limited women's intellectual opportunities, Ada Lovelace envisioned a digital future. She reminds us that innovation often begins not with building something, but with daring to imagine it first. Now, next up is Rosalind Franklin. There we go. Rosalind Franklin was born in 1920 in London into a family that valued education and public service. From a young age, she knew she wanted to be a scientist, even when girls were often discouraged from pursuing science. Wasn't ladylike, you know. So she studied chemistry at Cambridge University and became an expert in X-ray crystallography. Speaking too fast for my mouth here. A technique used to determine the structure of molecules by analyzing how X-rays scatter when they hit crystals. Rosalind was known for her precision. She did not jump to conclusions. She gathered data carefully, measured meticulously, and trusted evidence over ego. Now, that dedication to detail would lead her to one of the most important scientific images in history. In 1952, while working at King's College London, Rosalind Franklin and her graduate student Raymond Gosling captured an X-ray diffraction image of DNA. The image was labeled Photo 51. At first glance, it looked like just a blurry X shape. But to a trained eye, that X shape meant something profound. DNA had a helical structure. Rosalind's data was the clearest evidence yet of the molecule's form. Without her knowledge, Photo 51 was shown to scientists James Watson and Francis Crick. Using that image, along with her unpublished measurements, they built their own model of the double helix. And in 1953, Watson and Crick published their famous paper describing DNA structure. Rosalind's contributions were not fully credited. In 1962, Watson, Crick, and Maurice Wilkins received the Nobel Prize for discovering DNA structure. Rosalind Franklin was not included. She had died 4 years earlier, in 1958, from ovarian cancer, probably related to years of radiation exposure in her research. Unfortunately, the Nobel Prize is not awarded posthumously. For decades, her role was minimized, but over time, historians and scientists revisited the evidence. They recognized that her data was not incidental, it was essential. Rosalind Franklin later conducted groundbreaking research on viruses, contributing to our understanding of polio and tobacco mosaic virus. Today, she is widely acknowledged as a central figure in one of the most important discoveries in biology. Her story reminds us that science is built on collaboration, and that recognition does not always come immediately. But truth endures. Rosalind Franklin did not seek fame. She sought accuracy, and in doing so, she helped reveal the very blueprint of life. Now, our last one for this week is Dorothy Vaughan. Dorothy Vaughan was born in 1910 in Kansas City, Missouri, where I'm at, and raised in West Virginia. Oop, hang on. Sorry. All right. She was a gifted student who loved mathematics. After graduating from college at just 19, she became a high school math teacher, one of the few professional paths available to Black women at the time. But during World War II, something changed. The federal government needed mathematicians to support the growing aviation industry. Dorothy applied and was hired by the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, which would later become NASA. She joined the West Area Computing Unit, a segregated division where Black women performed complex calculations by hand. They were called human computers. Dorothy quickly distinguished herself, not only for her mathematical skill, but for her steady leadership. In 1949, Dorothy Vaughan became the first Black supervisor at NACA, but the promotion did not come with a new title or extra pay at first. But she performed the responsibilities anyway, advocating quietly and persistently for her team. She made sure the women she supervised were assigned meaningful projects. She fought for their promotions and ensured they were recognized for their expertise. Then, in the 1950s, something revolutionary began happening. Electronic computers were introduced. Many feared the machines would replace human computers. But Dorothy didn't panic. She prepared. She taught herself a new programming language called Fortran, one of the earliest computer languages, and then she taught it to her entire team. She made sure that when change came, her team would not be left behind. When NACA became NASA in 1958, segregation officially ended. But Dorothy's leadership had already ensured that her team transitioned successfully into programming roles. She understood that real leadership is not about personal recognition. It's about preparing others for success. Dorothy worked at NASA for nearly 3 decades. Her contributions remained largely unrecognized to the public until the film and book Hidden Figures brought her story to light. Which, off topic, but if anyone hasn't seen that or read it, you really should. It's an amazing book and film. So, sorry, back to our subject here. In 2019, she was posthumously awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, and NASA later renamed a building in her honor. Dorothy Vaughan's legacy isn't only about mathematics, it's about foresight. It's about resilience in the face of systemic barriers. And it's about making sure that when the future arrives, you're ready for it. So, as we've talked about on other weekly Women in History videos, look at the themes across all these generations. All these women are recognized for doing totally different things. They might have lived in totally different centuries and even spoken different languages. But they are so amazing, right? They've all had their own moment when the world said, no, you can't. And every single one of them says, yeah, I can. Watch me. So, the question isn't whether change is possible, right? They already answered that. It is. The question is, when your moment comes and somebody asks you that, or the world asks you that, what are you going to do? So I want you to think about that as you go. So thanks for coming today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we will see you in the next video.